Hey guys, tonight we're embracing a lifestyle even rougher than your Monday morning Zoom calls, being a knight squire, not the chivalrous armor polishing montage from the movies. No, you're about to experience the true grit, endless grime, and unfiltered medieval humiliation of squiredom. A life dedicated to the fine arts of shoe scraping, laundry hauling, and being yelled at by someone called Sir Percival the Moist. Before you get too settled, take a moment to like, subscribe, and maybe comment about the weirdest work task you've been given. Only if this video actually makes you laugh or let out a knowing groan. Trust me, you'll appreciate the solidarity. Now, dim those lights, turn on your fan for that low-budget castle ambiance, and sink into your bed, the only place where you're safe from being sent to polish a horse. Let's wonder together, how terrible was squire life really? What happens when you forget to oil your knight's codpiece? How did you survive sword practice if you were scared of splinters? Was fetch me my helmet a reasonable request when it weighed more than most toddlers? Could you endure a medieval morning routine that involves more mud than hygiene? Would you last a day in a world where your promotion means slightly warmer gruel? Well, open your eyes, the torches are flickering, the hay is scratchy, and you, my friend, have just woken up in the 1372. You are a squire, one missed goblet away from public shame, and there's already an angry rooster making eye contact. Good luck. The sun isn't even up, but somehow you are. The castle bell tolls, and suddenly you're wide awake. Not by choice, but because your straw mattress is home to beetles, excitement, and exactly zero comfort. No alarms, just a cold nose and the clatter of armor you'll never get to wear. This is not the morning you imagined after reading fairy tales. Forget a beaming sunrise filtering through jewel-colored glass, or a gentle servant rapping on your door with a tray of breakfast pastries and gossip. Instead, your eyelids flutter open as your roommate, if you could call a stable boy with a chronic cough a roommate, makes a noise somewhere between a sneeze and a groan. It's so chilly you can see your breath, so you make the brave, or maybe foolish, decision to wriggle out from under your only blanket. It smells faintly of onions and ambition. Of course, you're not a lord or a lady. None of the glamour of the tapestries in the great hall applies to you. You are somewhere between peasant and apprentice, and the castle is both your workplace and your house. The workday doesn't wait for you to be ready. There are no snooze buttons here, so you stumble to your feet before your mind has even finished forming a coherent thought. The floor is stone, the draft is insistent, and the fire in the hall died out hours ago. You'd give anything for a pair of woolen socks, but you settle for cold feet and the rush of impending chores. How did your day really begin in a castle? Not with a song, not with a pageant, but with the relentless pragmatism that only surviving another day demands. Your first task is arguably the hardest, leaving behind the illusion that life in a castle was ever easy for anyone who wasn't born at the very top. You make your way, half asleep, into a corridor lined with torches that have burned down to nubs, past the kitchen where cooks have been up even longer than you, already kneading dough with rough red hands. There's a clamor at the well outside. Water must be drawn, again and again, buckets full, enough for cooking and washing, and yes, for the toilets in the privies, because flushing hasn't been invented yet. You nod groggily to the others as you gather your share of the morning load. The icy water sloshes out, soaking your shirt, making you shiver. There isn't a single silk dressing gown in sight. You're lucky if your tunic isn't still damp from the last hurried wash. You pass servants scurrying along with laundry, valets struggling with cloaks almost bigger than themselves, and the occasional knight striding past in polished boots, pretending not to notice your existence. You wonder if you'll ever get to wear shoes that clean, but for now, your job is simple. Don't draw attention and don't fall behind, because there's always someone eager to remind you where you stand, usually by assigning you extra stables duty or an unfortunate session with the chamber pots. If you have breakfast at all, it's yesterday's bread and a thin soup that tastes mostly of boiled hope. Picnics under the banners? That's reserved for tournaments and visiting nobles. For the rest, it's soup, more chores, then whatever surprises the cook can wring out of the storeroom, stale cheese, a wrinkled apple if you're lucky. And yet, as you hustle from hall to courtyard to kitchen, you can't help but feel a strange pride. Sure, your hands are raw and your feet are numb, but you're here, in a real castle, a living, breathing world of stone, sweat, and history. No bard's tale about life in a castle will ever quite get it right. The wake-up call isn't glamorous, but it's absolutely unforgettable. And it's yours. You shuffle into the hall hoping for a feast, but find only yesterday's bread and something that might be porridge if you believe in miracles. The smell of boiled turnips wafts through the air, making you wonder if hunger is a modern invention. This is the breakfast experience of the monastic world. Less meal, more negotiation with your stomach's expectations. There's a dull clatter as bowls scrape along the wooden tables, each monk or novice peering into the gray mush with quiet resignation. You take a seat on the hard bench, eyeing your portion as if it might reveal itself to be something other than what it appears. A culinary plot twist, perhaps. But no, it's still wet, bland, and resolutely unidentifiable. Across the table, Brother Matthew gives you a conspiratorial glance. He's been here long enough to know that optimism is foolish, but camaraderie can at least make the meal go down. "One day," he whispers, "they'll serve bread made today." You almost smile, but the prospect seems as fictional as porridge that tastes of anything except wet hay. The bread is tough, a study in medieval preservation techniques. Drop it, and you're likely to chip the bench. You gnaw a corner furtively, trying not to look as desperate as you feel. Every crunch echoes in the high-ceilinged hall, as monks try to eat quietly and focus on the reading at table, a passage inevitably chosen for its exhortation to humility and gratitude. You dutifully listen, spoon halted halfway to your mouth, as the reader reminds you to embrace simplicity, to be thankful for the Lord's provision, and not to yearn for the extravagance of spice or honey. You wonder if involuntarily chewing the same mouthful for 3 minutes counts as an act of ascetic devotion. The turnips, if you can call them that, after boiling has stripped their essence, float mournfully in the communal pot. You ladle some onto your plate, watching the pale chunks slither around, as if they too are trying to escape consumption. The smell, which seemed merely unpleasant at a distance, is somehow worse up close, earthy, vegetal, and oddly metallic, as though every turnip brings with it a hint of Iron Age nostalgia. And then there is the porridge. Each monk receives a ladleful, thick enough to stand a spoon in, but possessing all the flavor of old parchment. There are rumors, unsubstantiated but persistent, that somewhere in the abbey's history, someone added a pinch of salt. The event is spoken of as one might a folk legend, gone unconfirmed and fading with time. Somewhere down the table, a younger novice stifles a cough as he tries to gulp his portion without tasting it, eyes watering from the effort. The older monks, stoic from years of experience, set a steady pace, spoon up, mouthful in, chew slowly. Not a word of complaint escapes, only the occasional sigh that seems to say, "This too shall pass." As you chew, your mind drifts. Yesterday, maybe, you imagined yourself missing the outside world, fresh apples, eggs, a little butter. This morning, you resent yourself for the weakness of nostalgia. Out here, breakfast is not an event, but a ritual, one more rung on the ladder of humility, a daily reminder that comfort is for another life. In the end, what sustains you is not the food, but the rhythm, the scrape of bowls, the low hum of whispered benediction, the small smile traded with a table-mate when the loaf splits in an odd shape. Breakfast of the barely living. It's not the feast that fortifies, but the act of surviving it together. And with that, bowl empty, you stand and file out, fortified at least by the knowledge that lunch can't possibly be any worse. Or so you hope. Before you get to dream of noble quests, you're sent on a journey to collect, empty, and somehow not spill the chamber pots. You know you're somebody when your main foe looks suspiciously like last night's stew. Every hopeful squire dreams of slaying dragons, wielding a gleaming sword, and earning the reverence of roaring crowds. Yet, on your very first morning, destiny hands you a more pressing, less glorious challenge: the noble order of sanitation. Chamber pots, the not-so-hidden blight of every hall, wait beneath beds, behind curtains, and, if you're really unlucky, right beside the knight's own armor stand. Before you even greet your master with a "how do you do," you're nose to nose with the remnants of last night's feast, now in its more processed form. The trick isn't simply in grabbing the pots and dashing toward the door. No, there's a choreography to this ancient dance, a teetering, tiptoeing ballet. The old squires watch with amusement from the side, betting on which greenhorn will make it to the courtyard before their cargo meets an untimely end. You learn quickly that confidence is your enemy. Those who swagger lose precious contents to the rush. The veterans shuffle, step, and glide with a reverence usually reserved for sacred relics, balancing their burdens with the focus of a tightrope walker above a pit of crocodiles. And then there's the aroma, the squire's christening. One moment you're gagging, insisting you'll never get used to it. The next, you're so accustomed to the scent that you find yourself unmoved in the heat of the mess hall, even as others wrinkle their noses. It becomes a badge of honor, a kind of nasal armor, proof that you're toughening up for the life ahead. Of course, this means your friends or enemies occasionally gift you with accidental pot overflows, but even that is par for the course. The more seasoned the squire, the more creative their pranks, a subtle passing of wisdom through humiliation and hilarity. Woe to the squire who fumbles. A single spill, and you're the subject of legend for weeks. Your most unfortunate incident retold at supper tables with ever-growing embellishments. Remember when Tom tried the one-arm two-pot technique? Still stains on the tapestry. Even the knights join in, dispensing mock advice. Perhaps next time, carry them atop your head for better balance. But within the ridicule, there's a glimmer of respect. Everyone knows this rite of passage, and everyone who serves in the castle, at some point, has shouldered the same fate. Oddly, the chamber pot duty shapes more than your sense of smell. It's here, in awkward hardships, that the foundation for true camaraderie begins. Helping a fellow novice survive a disastrous slip, or plotting an escape from especially malodorous chambers, forges bonds born of shared suffering. All for one, and for all, our stomachs. Becomes a rallying cry as you slog through the worst spots together, laughing at the sheer indignity of it all. After weeks of this grueling routine, you begin to notice a shift. Tasks that once seemed impossible become routine. Your hands grow steadier, your steps more sure. You start to welcome new recruits with a knowing grin, ushering them into this secret society of chamber pot veterans. You've earned a strange sort of pride. The hard, uncelebrated tasks become your armor. If you can survive this, you reason, what can the world possibly throw at you next? Dragons, perhaps, but hopefully something that smells a little better. In the end, the art of chamber pot retrieval is more than a menial test. It's a lesson in humility, endurance, and the collective comedy of castle life. One day, as you stride across the keep, pots perfectly balanced, nostrils unflinching, you realize you've conquered the first great challenge of your journey, and that, in its own unsavory way, is a victory worth savoring. Your knight's armor, fresh from yesterday's battle, or, more likely, parade, needs a buff. Not from magic, but from your sad, soapy rag. Each dent tells a story. Most say, Squire fell over, again. You attack the grime with all the zeal of a squire who has just watched his dignity go skittering into a puddle. There's no applause, only the scrape of your knuckles against steel and the unspeakable aroma of last night's boiled turnips, wafting from Sir Percival's dying lunch. Once again, you promise yourself that if you ever wield a sword, you'll wield it with gloves on. Nice gloves, leather, not turnip-scented rags. With every swirl of your rag, a new memory surfaces. There's the gouge from Sir Percival's heroic charge, directly into an apple cart, the mysterious green smear, part moss, part old stew, that refuses to budge, and that one scratch Sir insists is from a dragon, but which you're certain came from Sir's dispute with a rusty chamber pot. These are the battle scars of a knight's life, or, more accurately, the scars of a knight's awkward attempts at mounting a horse after 3 too many goblets of mead. You stare into the steel, hoping for inspiration, but what looks back is as smudged and tired as you feel. It is your lot, as squire, to restore not just iron, but ego. There are no bards singing in the background, no trumpet fanfare, just you, your rag, and the sort of damp chill only an English castle can provide. Every squire's dream, really. Sometimes, if you squint hard, you see yourself reflected in a polished vambrace. Someday, maybe, you'll be the one placing your battered armor by the fire, waiting for someone else to make it shine. But that dream is thin. For now, you're elbow deep in suds, soothing Sir Percival's anxieties about reputation. Because everyone who is anyone is at the village fair, and the armor is streaky. You learn things too. You learn which polish smells less like goat, which rags soak best, and how to scrub while dodging the occasional kick from Sir's steed, who, to be fair, also smells like boiled turnips. You become intimately familiar with rivets, and with the pain of jamming your thumb into them for the 5th time before lunch. Pain is the silent refrain of squires everywhere. There's a rhythm to it. Dull, dull scrub, scrape, polish, sigh. At one point, you imagine the armor as your armor. You imagine heroic deeds, dragon slaying and maiden saving, cheers rising as you shine in the sunlight. But the fantasy shatters with the thunk of Sir Percival's boots outside the door, asking, again, if the hauberk is spotless. Is it ever spotless? On lucky days, you find a kind of meditative calm in the repetition. On less lucky days, you fantasize about running off to join a troupe of minstrels, or at least about Sir Percival developing an allergy to metal. Yet, even on the worst days, you take a sort of pride in the finished product. You know the truth. Behind every shining knight is a squire with raw hands and a slightly unhinged smile. Knighthood, from this soapy vantage, looks less like glory and more like grit. The real polish is patience, and maybe, on a really good day, a bit of self-deprecating humor as you flick the last spot from Sir Percival's helmet and try to ignore the new dent he's sure to acquire the moment he stands up. And so you scrub on, not for glory, not for shouts of admiration, but for the faint hope that someday someone will realize that knights may win the stories, but squires, battered soul and all, are the ones who make them shine. Knights ride horses. Horses produce artifacts. Your job? Relive every muddy trail and manure mishap, scraping boots until they reflect the dignity you have slowly lost. Let us peer into the world of boot scraping, the noble, yet surprisingly unsung art that sits at the intersection of biology, engineering, and existential crisis. The average knight's boot collects a volume of detritus that is almost picturesque, if you squint or lose your sense of smell entirely. Mud, hay, the occasional beetle, and, let's not sugarcoat it, the leavings of your valiant steed. This forms a stratified geological record of the day's adventures. Geologists could take samples. Instead, they leave it all to you. Boot scraping is not simply a mechanical chore, it's a psychological gauntlet. First, you must locate the communal boot scraper, often a wrought iron tool masquerading as a stick with anger issues. Then you pause, take a deep breath, hopefully before the stench overtakes consciousness, and get to work. There's something poetic about the rhythmic clang of iron against soul, a metronome for contemplating every questionable life choice that brought you here. Technique matters. Amateur scrapers might be tempted to attack the problem head-on, but veterans know the art is all in the wrist. Angle the boot just so, apply carefully directed. Force and hope. There's always that one stubborn globule that clings with the tenacity of a loyal squire. Scientists call this sticky matter. The rest of us call it why me. Some say it's the protein structure of hay-infused manure. Others say the universe is testing your resolve. But boot scraping holds its own sort of zen. As you flick debris and wonder if you'll ever regain sensation in your fingers, you start to notice patterns. This glob is darker. That glob has a hint of oats. Is this what enlightenment feels like? Or just what happens when you inhale too much ammonia? Either way, you're in the flow. Call it mindful cleaning. 14th century edition. Let's consider the implements. Each castle boasts its own breed of scraper. Some are elegant, curling like wrought iron vines. Others resemble medieval torture devices, which, as it happens, is a fair description. Occasionally, the local blacksmith gets creative, installing spikes, brushes, or strange mechanisms that look suspiciously experimental. Approach with caution. The last thing anyone needs is to lose a toe to an overzealous innovation. Scientific study, read local gossip, suggests that boot scraping rituals not only spare castle floors, but fortify character. Every successful scrape is a victory, however small, over entropy. The universe may tend toward disorder, but for a fleeting moment, your boots do not. That dignity you thought was gone, perhaps it's hiding under that last stubborn clump. What then is the true meaning of boot scraping? Is it a Sisyphean punishment or a medieval microcosm of resilience? Knees bent, ye scrape, not for glory, not for applause, but for the unsung cleanliness of those who must walk through great halls and not leave telltale trails behind. You perfect your technique. You develop a sixth sense for balance, how to hold your boot just so, teetering between scraping efficiency and public humiliation. And as you finish, exhausted and vaguely triumphant, you realize something profound. You may not be the knight riding into legend, but you are the quiet hero who allows legends to remain unsullied by manure. The science of boot scraping is, in truth, the science of survival, adaptation, and dignity salvaged from indignity. Clean boots, clear mind. Or, at the very least, a boot that doesn't squish. In conclusion, remember, in the annals of chivalric history, behind every shining plate of armor is a pair of boots, freshly scraped, and someone who knows that science is best practiced with a strong stomach and a sharper scraper. At least once per day, someone will misplace a goblet. You will spend 90 minutes retracing drunken footsteps, crawling under tables, praying nobody notices you drinking from the pitcher. Goblets, as it turns out, possess Houdini-like escape abilities. One moment, their metallic bases are glinting in your hand, and the next, they have dematerialized with the last echo of a drunken server's laughter. It is never your goblet. You are, of course, far too careful. It's always that of the most scatterbrained squire on staff, or the customer who began the night with a 7-part toast and is now loudly insisting, "No, it's definitely under that man's kilt." Searching for a missing goblet becomes a kind of medieval scavenger hunt, accompanied by a small chorus of tipsy audience members who offer helpful comments such as, "Did you try the well?" Too often you find yourself treated as a knight on a holy quest, raised goblet aloft to your imaginary steed, except that your chainmail is polyester and you're crawling beneath the buffet. You become intimately familiar with the undercarriage of banquet tables, sticky with spilled mead and the ghosts of past dinners. You will discover items unrelated to goblets. Tears of laughter are shed more than tears of frustration, but only by those who are not you. There are, of course, stages to the hunt. First, denial. There is no way the goblet has vanished. It was right there on the sideboard, wasn't it? Second, blame. Someone else must have cleared it away, surely. Perhaps the bard, in a well-intentioned but misguided cleanup spree. Third, hope. Maybe a guest borrowed it to admire the craftsmanship and will soon return it, full of compliments and a tip. By the fourth stage, despair. You are methodically opening every door, poking your head into broom closets and emerging with fresh cobwebs and a sneaking suspicion that your coworkers have started a betting pool on your search radius. The fifth and final stage, acceptance, occurs when you realize the evening cannot progress until the goblet is found, which means you will now interrogate the entire kitchen staff. Their answers, delivered with the weary patience of those who have seen far too many goblets come and go, will not help. They will only shake their heads and, if you're lucky, offer a sympathy bread roll. Sometimes the kitchen cat gets involved, adding an unexpected wrestling match for the day's entertainment. Should you, after exhaustive searching, fail to locate the missing vessel, you are forced to execute the humiliating handoff. This is when you must approach management, confess your failure, and request a replacement goblet. The walk of shame through the crowded hall is accompanied by the silent judgment of 50 onlookers, some of whom have perhaps been in your shoes and remember what adventure and mortification taste like. Management, of course, will respond in one of two ways. Endless, slightly patronizing grace. It happens to everyone, darling. Even Sir Glastonbury lost a goblet once. Or exasperation. Again, did you check under the bard? Either way, it's a story that will chase you for weeks. When, finally, the goblet is retrieved, whether wedged behind a tapestry, masquerading as a candle holder, or ingeniously incorporated into a flower arrangement, relief is swift and overwhelming. There may even be applause from coworkers, or, at the very least, not mockery, which is the more common reward. The goblet hunt, more than anything, is a rite of passage. Every server must endure it, and every server will, at some point, fail spectacularly. But, rest assured, tomorrow someone else will lose a goblet and the cycle will begin anew, your own disaster gently fading into legend, until you find yourself crawling under those tables again. Every squire dreams of gleaming blades and heroic duels. In reality, it's you, a too-heavy wooden sword, and the world's most aggressive practice dummy, Edwin, who is 12 but angry. Edwin has the wiry energy of a terrier and the mean right hook of a street vendor defending the last meat pie. He also seems to take personal offense that you, an unsuspecting squire, have dared to stand upon his practice ground, also known as the crunchy patch of weeds behind the stables. No matter how many times you ask, he will never explain why he's mad. That's just the natural order of things. Sir Aldrich, your knightly patron, watches the first round with the studied indifference of a man who's seen this unfold 1,000 times before, each ending with a squire sporting fresh bruises and a slightly improved parry. As Edwin advances with the merciless focus of a hawk eyeing a particularly slow mouse, you remember yesterday's advice. Keep your elbows in and your chin tucked. It doesn't matter. Edwin's technique is a blur, all wild limbs and sharp corners, and his wooden sword is a whirlwind of splinters, angles, and accidental slaps to the thigh. You have to flow, not flinch, Sir Aldrich calls from the sidelines, sipping something suspiciously like cider. By this stage, flowing means bobbing, weaving, and performing an interpretive dance inspired by farm geese. Still, you manage a couple of awkward blocks. If Edwin notices, he honors your progress by narrowing his eyes and doubling his attacks. Sweat gathers at your brow, runs in rivulets down your nose. Your arms burn. The sword which looked heroic and inviting in the armory now feels like a boat oar, overlong, splintery, and designed to conspire against you. Every clang of wood is a kind of Morse code, spelling out the new geography of pain you'll discover in the bath tonight. Still, somewhere beneath the bruises and panic, you sense the smallest flicker of triumph. You haven't dropped your sword. Yet, training, you quickly realize, isn't about glory. It's about learning to retreat with dignity when Edwin charges, and that there is an art to timing your accidental stumbles just before his hardest swings. Wooden swords have a habit of catching you behind the knee, or rapping across the knuckles, but between these ignominious moments, there are flashes where the world narrows to Edwin's advance, and your defense, and, briefly, your reflexes almost keep up. At some point, you catch Sir Aldrich's eye. He offers a slow nod, the kind that says, "You may not be winning, but you're not giving up." That's the secret, you realize. Sword practice is less about talent and more about stubbornness. Edwin, for all his bristles and scowls, is just a test. The real battle is between your spirit and that growing catalog of aches and humiliation. Eventually, Edwin tires. His swings slacken, his cruel smirk fading into something like respect, or at least less active hostility. Practice ends the way it always does, with Sir Aldrich clapping both of you on the back, offering encouragement in the form of, "Next time, you'll bruise less," and suggesting a trip to the kitchens for the real liniment, stew and bread. As you limp away, you realize swordplay isn't about duels under moonlight or rousing shouts in the lists. It's about perseverance, humility, and learning to laugh when you're flat on your back. The sky spinning overhead, Edwin's wooden blade raised in blurry triumph. And after all, the bruises fade, but your next duel with Edwin is already booked for tomorrow, and this time, you just might land a hit of your own. Yesterday's tunics aren't going to wash themselves. You haul linen, scrub questionable stains, and marvel at the power of river water to ruin your last pair of socks. Yet, for all its monotony, laundry day is suspiciously social. You're joined by neighbors, acquaintances, and that one remarkably nosy goat, all congregating along the water's edge. The air crackles with gossip, thrown in with the laundry. "Did you hear about Quintilla's missing sandal?" someone asks, as you wring out a tunic that's changed color more times than Jupiter's moons. You nod, swirling soapwort foam through your fingers, trying to remember if you're actually washing your own clothing, or if this is, once again, something from your accidentally borrowed communal pile. A cascade of sunlight bounces off the river, lending the scene the faint illusion of magic, if magic consists of calloused hands, wrinkled knuckles, and the omnipresent whiff of sheep's milk soap. Laundry is, for most, not merely a chore, but a tactile lesson in patience. Some stains, you learn, are forever. Mulberry, olive oil, ancient wine. Each a memoir written on your only reliable shift, refusing to fade. You might as well name them The Ghost of Last Night's Dinner, or That Time I Tripped Over the Amphora. Washing itself is improvisational theater. Is that a stick for beating? a lye-soaked pebble, a moderately clean sandal wielded in desperation. Every tool is fair game. As you scrub, you envy the patricians who pay for their togas to be laundered at Fuloniki, public laundry shops overflowing with the sharp scent of ammonia. Of course, that's because they're washing with fermented urine, a detail best kept quiet at dinner parties. Luxury, it turns out, is a matter of definition. Which brings you back to the river, where nature provides both water and abundant opportunity for disaster. A sudden squelch signals that you've overstepped a muddy patch, and now your hem is colder and heavier. In the distance, a toddler enthusiastically attempts to launder a potato, while his mother conducts a running argument with her cousin about what counts as clean enough. There are casualties, lost socks, runaway linens, even a well-intentioned cloak that's now floating downstream toward the mill. The endless rhythm of work is punctuated by moments of strange communal joy. Someone sings an off-key version of a harvest hymn. Another recounts a joke about the local magistrate's doomed attempt to dye his tunic green. Laughter bubbles as quickly as the suds, and for a moment, you forget the ache in your arms. Instead, you let yourself drift, content with the comfortable camaraderie and the minor victories. A stain defeated, a garment rescued from being entirely mauve. Of course, the gods are not without a sense of humor. A rain cloud, sensing your fleeting satisfaction, drops a handful of menacing droplets, threatening to undo a morning's worth of work. Shouting, you and the others scoop up your baskets and scramble for shelter. The goat, undeterred, continues chewing on someone's under tunic, achieving what hundreds of washings never could: utter destruction. As the downpour finally ends, you spread what remains of the laundry over bushes and stones, praying for a return of the sunlight and a helpful breeze. There is no guarantee. The forecast is as unpredictable as the state of your linens. Tomorrow, you suspect, will look much the same. But for now, as you collapse with your fellow laundresses, comparing sud-soaked hands and stories, the day takes on a strange kind of radiance. Laundry may indeed be forever, but so too is laughter, resilience, and the peculiar satisfaction of a tunic that, against all odds, at least smells clean. Chainmail is not glamorous. It's 40 pounds of medieval jangle, and your job is to keep it shiny and rust-free. This means hours of rubbing oil into something that smells like wet dog and forgotten lunches. Let's start with the basics. Why oil chainmail at all? The answer is simple. Neglect it for a week, and your battle gear becomes a flecked orange disaster. Once rust sets in, it's like medieval glitter, impossible to get rid of, except rust is the party nobody wants to attend. Soldiers returning from campaign were greeted not with the aroma of roast meat and gratitude, but with the earthy, sour tang of corrosion, and a task list that included find rag, locate oil, scrub until fingers ache. If you're picturing heroic warriors sitting by a fire after the heat of battle, you're about half right. They're sitting, yes, but slumped in exhaustion, frantically buffing their rings with bits of greasy cloth. Castles didn't come with laundry service, or, for that matter, WD-40, animal fat rendered down from yesterday's unfortunate. Ox or pig was the gold standard lubricant. Not only did it prevent rust, it also layered your armor in a stealthy sheen of beefy aroma. Enemies might smell you coming, but at least your mail wouldn't fall apart before you got there. The process was monotonous and namelessly uncomfortable. Chainmail isn't a soft blanket or a snuggly scarf. It's an intricate, cold, scratchy net, clinking restlessly even when you try to hold it still. To oil it properly, you had to manipulate thousands of links, massaging each with unctuous care. Gloves? Maybe if you were lucky. More likely, oil seeped into every crease of your skin, settling under your fingernails, transforming your hands into something halfway between a blacksmith's and a chef's. Of course, the whole ritual was communal. After all, nothing cements camaraderie like the smell of old tallow and sweat in a tiny stone room packed with grumbling squires, each as grimy and oil-splattered as the next. Conversation drifted from complaints about the quality of the latest batch of oil, too watery, too clumpy, smells like turnips, to heroic claims about personal cleaning techniques. My father always said, if your chainmail's too easy to clean, you're not using it right. This predictably was met with groans and bits of tallow hurled from the shadows. And then there were the unexpected hazards, a careless slip, a link pinched between two fingers, or the bitter disappointment of discovering a patch of hidden rust after hours of work. Some warriors grew superstitious about their oiling routines, convinced there was a lucky sequence: left arm first, then torso, never the legs, or calamity would surely follow. Everyone agreed, though, that it was much better to lose a bit of hair to a stuck ring than to show up at inspection with even a smidge of orange creeping along your gear. Was all this effort worth it? Absolutely. Properly maintained chainmail wasn't just for show. In battle, clean, supple links slid against one another, flexing with every movement, while dry, rusty mail could lock up or snap with a poorly timed swing. Some said you could hear the difference. Oiled armor moved with a smooth, soft hiss. Neglected mail creaked and grated like bones in an old tomb. So, while oiling chainmail won't win you any medals or ballads, it remains the unsung hero of the medieval campaign. Heroes might rise and fall by sword and shield, but their reputation often rested on the humble act of keeping rust at bay, one oily finger at a time. Let me know if you'd like the segment adapted to different structural elements, or with added dialogue, more humor, or deeper historical context. Horses don't care if you're tired. Horses want apples, treats, and frequent emergency hoof attention. You crouch, you hammer, and every clop brings you closer to a second career in podiatry. It's said that a knight is only as brave as the horse he rides. If that's true, then a squire is exactly as brave as the horse is tolerant of anyone coming near its precious hooves. My first lesson at the forge was, don't stand behind the horse. My second lesson, urgently delivered, was, don't stand in front of the horse either. Sandwiched by anxiety and centuries of well-aimed hooves, I learned the art of negotiation, the kind that involves apples, gentle words, and, when in doubt, running away very quickly. The knight's horse was a mountain in motion, a gleaming mass of muscle powered by oats, pride, and a deep, mysterious urge to tap dance once I'd lined up a nail and said a quick prayer. My job? To look like I knew what I was doing while keeping my kneecaps intact. The ritual began with the knight inspecting his horse's iron shoes as if expecting to find a missing diamond. "See that chip?" he'd say, pointing to a scratch visible only through divine revelation. "Fix it." Which is how I spent 9 weeks learning what a rasp is for. Answer: it's apparently not for cheese. And how shoes for horses come in more sizes and shapes than the hats at a royal wedding. Each hoof was a puzzle, each puzzle a small disaster. Armed with a hammer, nails, and a misplaced sense of optimism, I approached the first hoof. Lifting it felt like hoisting an anvil covered in silk and stubbornness. Horses, you see, are critics. They sense nervousness the way sharks sense blood, and they exploit it ruthlessly, shifting their weight, nickering suspiciously, and occasionally attempting the noble art of interpretive dance at the exact moment you need them motionless. That's when the mind-warping realization hits. Your audience is not the knight, it's not the blacksmith with his seasoned size, it's the horse. If you want to keep all 10 toes, you'd better learn to read the subtle cues, flicked ears, swishing tails, and ominous silence before stormy rebellion. I began to see the world through equine eyes. This squire is shaky, let's see if he can hop. Knights had speeches about valor. Squires found heroism in keeping their fingers, toes, and dignity simultaneously. A successful shoeing was nothing short of a diplomatic triumph, a careful balancing act of distraction, persuasion, and split-second withdrawal when the horse decided it preferred its old shoes. Thank you very much. What struck me most, beyond the physical comedy of the process, was the strange partnership that grew between horse and squire. With every hammered nail and padded neck, an understanding formed. I would be quick, gentle, and provide treats. The horse would mostly refrain from making me a cautionary tale. In those moments, as iron met hoof and sweat trickled down my brow, I wasn't just working. I was part of something essential, historical, and oddly moving. By the end, I could shoe a horse without flinching every time it snorted. My reward? The look of mild tolerance from my knight's steed, the grudging respect of an old blacksmith, and, yes, all 10 toes still heroically attached. Not bad for a squire whose first attempt ended with a legendary pratfall into the muck, witnessed by half the garrison. Section word count, Daozium's 600 words. If you want adjustments for more visual gags, dialogue, or historical color, just let me know. Knights have elaborate mealtime rituals. You, the humble squire, memorize which fork, just kidding, there's only one, goes where, and try not to spill the gravy. Again, the round table isn't just a talking point for Arthur's HR department, it's a battlefield of etiquette. The tablecloth, technically clean but sporting a suspicious stew stain from 3 nights ago, is your terrain of operations. Your main weapon? A spoon that doubled as a spade earlier in the day. Cutlery in Camelot is less Downton Abbey, more what hasn't rolled under the table yet. You lay out trenchers, wooden slabs passing for plates, checking for any remaining crumbs from yesterday's trench warfare with the bread loaf. There are no napkin folds here, only the eternal hope someone remembered to wash their hands after jousting. You are responsible for aligning all the goblets, no two the same size naturally, to resemble at least a distant cousin of uniformity. Sir Gawain always demands his goblet filled to precisely 3 fingers below the brim, citing ancient prophecy. Sir Bedivere insists on the chipped one for sentimental reasons, meaning he once used it to win a drinking contest against a visiting Saxon who mistook vinegar for mead. You execute your goblet choreography while dodging Sir Kay's elbows as he demonstrates sword moves in slow motion, convinced the table setting is an appropriate audience. Placements matter, even if no one can agree where the salt dish goes, and half of them use their sleeves anyway. As you ferry herbs and bread, you listen to a heated debate on whether rosemary brings valor or just burps. You soon realize that table setting really means diplomacy and dishware, and it's your job to keep the peace between the factions, those who want the breadbasket upwind and those who firmly believe in downwind dispersal for maximum aroma. There are rules, of course, occasionally enforced, especially if the queen is presiding. Bowls first, meats in the center, root vegetables to the right, mysterious pies to the left, out of direct eye contact, just in case. You pretend these codes of conduct came from ancient scrolls, but they're mostly made up on the spot as you scramble to accommodate Sir Percival's superstitions. Don't let 2 loaves touch. And Lancelot's penchant for rearranging the cheese at dramatic moments. When the knights finally gather, there's a brief hush. All eyes flick to the settings, some approving, some searching for evidence of yesterday's spilled ale, which, despite your scrubbing, always leaves a faint stickiness. The air brims with anticipation, punctuated by stomach growls and the occasional groan as someone remembers last night's turnip stew. Serving, you adopt the posture of a performer, balanced, nimble, always prepared for an unscripted request. More spice. Less spice. What is this? When the salt cellar tips, you improvise a joke about seasoning for courage, earning a chuckle, or at least a begrudging snort, from across the table. To the untrained eye, the arena of table setting is chaos with cutlery. But to you, each plate and mug is an opportunity, a chance for order, camaraderie, and a fleeting moment where spilled gravy isn't the main event. If one knight lifts his goblet and winks in approval, you know you've triumphed. You may be a squire, but tonight, the round table is your stage, and the scattered crumbs and unpredictable nobles, your unruly, hungry audience. Your knight's luscious medieval mullet doesn't comb itself. You navigate tangles, head lice, and a sudden conversation about honor while holding a very sharp blade near your boss's ear. Before you even whip out the comb, you must first perform the ritual that is the nightly hair inspection, with a flourish that suggests you do this all the time. Despite having precisely 0 formal training in medieval hair care, you part the chainmail hood, ready for whatever surprises the scalp might hold. Spoiler, it's lice. It's always lice. You wield your comb like a sword and lean in close, your nostrils filled with the unforgettable aroma of onion soup and horses from last night's feast. This is less a salon and more a petri dish, but you have your reputation to consider. The process is delicate, a combination of detangling, delousing, and ensuring the esteemed knight doesn't look like he's gotten into a fight with a hedge, and lost. Of all a squire's duties, this is the one where the fate of your eyebrows is most at stake, particularly when Sir Guy starts reminiscing about the Battle of Turnip Hill. He waves his arms around, causing you to pause mid-snip. One ill-timed gesture, and your knight is -1 ear, and your +1 trip to the dungeon. Small talk is not optional. Sir, this reminds me of the story of Sir Hector's beard. Quite the bramble patch, that one, you say, buying yourself a few seconds as you work free a particularly stubborn knot. Sir Guy grunts in agreement, launching into a lengthy anecdote about chivalry, glory, and what he calls the importance of presentation. You nod attentively, eyes on the prize, getting through this without drawing blood, yours, his, or, if you're unlucky, a flea's. Dignity is everything, even as you juggle the fine art of multitasking, soothing the knight's ego while scraping last season's porridge from his sideburns. You must exude an air of unwavering reverence for the noble man under your scissors. You know, deep down, that if word gets out about last Thursday's bowl-over-the-head incident, you'll be reenacting the tale in the form of lowly mop duty for the rest of the Squire season. But there's more to this than just aesthetics. This is about preparing your knight for the serious business of being seen. Today, it's an audience with the local lord. Tomorrow, a joust. The expectation is that a knight should step onto the field, not looking like he's just crawled out from under a hay wagon. You trim, tidy, and arrange until Sir Guy's mane resembles something closer to gallant war hero rather than escaped woodland hermit. There's also the matter of managing expectations. Your knight may have visions of Arthurian glamour, but you're acutely aware that a medieval comb more closely resembles a rake, and conditioner is whatever isn't currently crawling away. Still, you push through, honing a look that says, I have vanquished my foes, and also, my scalp is itch-free. As you finish, there's a brief moment of ceremony. The mirror is little more than a polished plate, but you hold it up with the flourish befitting any royal barber. Sir Guy inspects your handiwork, running a hand through his newly tamed locks with the seriousness of a man choosing a new coat of armor. Well done, lad, he nods, dignity restored and spirits lifted. For a fleeting moment, you're not just a squire, you're the guardian of his honor, one snip at a time. And as you sweep up the remnants of battle from the rushes, you know that tomorrow brings more hair, more high-stakes banter, and, if you're lucky, slightly fewer lice. It's time for armor assembly, a frantic medley of buckles, straps, and last-second panic. Because if something's askew, guess who's first in line for a lecture about the good old days? First comes the underpadding, that thick tunic that's supposed to stop the armor from gnawing your skin like an angry squirrel. The trick is to get the laces tight enough that nothing rubs, but not so tight that you're gasping before the first clash. At this stage, everyone's hopping from one foot to the other, arms awkwardly wriggling through sleeves, trying not to reveal too much panic. You always know the veterans. They glide through this process, muttering jokes about battle selfies and Instagram-ready greaves. The rest of us, meanwhile, grapple with elbow cops that refuse to face the same direction for more than 2 minutes. Now comes the chorus of clinks, the unmistakable metallic music of anticipation. Volunteers march down the rows, cinching breastplates into place and slapping backs with encouragement that's somewhere between pep talk and threat. Good luck, don't drop your shield again. That is battle camaraderie at its finest. Horsehair crests bristle as helmets get wedged on with all the grace of a stubborn jam jar lid. Gauntlets clack, sabatons clatter. The air fills with a cocktail of anticipation and the unforgettable aroma of recycled medieval humanity. Wool and nerves with a hint of last. Knight's meat pie. Of course, someone always discovers a missing piece, usually an essential one. Last month, I watched a grown man scour the grass for his left gauntlet, accusing a nearby child, a bystander, and even a passing duck of armor theft. The mystery was solved only when he realized he'd clipped it to his own belt. Each reenactment morning is a roll call not just for people, but also for every strap, plate, and mysterious brass fastener you swore you never owned. Then comes the inspection, performed with the solemnity of a knighting ceremony. The group's battle-hard cynic, every club has one, stalks past, scrutinizing each buckle and loose string. The stakes? Only your pride and, quite possibly, your circulation. A crooked helmet? Expect a colorful anecdote about that feller in '92 who wore his breastplate backward and lost a joust to a hay bale. Get caught with mismatched greaves, and you'll hear a ballad of woe involving medieval socks and ruined marriages. At this point, even the toughest warriors start to sweat, double-checking every strap and bracing for a public roasting. And the nerves are as much a part of the garb as the mail. Even those who've faced mock combat 100 times shuffle their feet and crack quiet jokes, disguising anxiety behind bravado and bad puns. You remember last year's bruises. You picture the crowd, the bugle call, the thunder of running feet. Most of all, you wonder if you'll remember the choreography, avoid death by spatula, and live to tell the tale at dinner. Yet, within the chaos, there's a unifying charm, a clumsy, heartfelt ritual that bonds everyone together. There's the knowing grin exchanged as someone fumbles their straps, the shared grimace as swords are picked up and shields banged for luck, the whispered reminders that, we do this for fun, right? It's nervous laughter over cold cider, a collective inhale before the cheers and the chaos. By the time the group shuffles toward the field, armor glinting, hearts quickening, you're more than half prepared for whatever the day might hurl your way, whether arrow, javelin, or heckling from the peanut gallery. Sure, buckles might rattle, and a gauntlet may still be on backward, but you're in this together, nerves and all. And as the announcer's voice rises and the drums begin, you realize the real battle started in the dressing tent. With the speed of a medieval Amazon prime, you set off on another helmet hunt, following the trail of breadcrumbs and stray gauntlets. Will you find it before the tournament or become the cautionary tale? The castle corridors are humming with anticipation. Knights polish armor, squires hustle, and somewhere a minstrel is butchering a lute solo. But you, single-minded as a hound on a scent, comb through hallways, eyes peeled for any trace of your knight's headgear. The floor tells its own story. Muddy boot prints, a suspiciously helmet-shaped dent on the seat, tapestry, and even a chunk of chainmail snagged on a brass candlestick. Each clue inches you closer, dojo master of deductive reasoning, or so you tell yourself. You interrogate the locals. First, the resident jester. He's balancing a goblet on his nose and claiming he saw something shiny ricocheting down the grand staircase 3 hours ago. Or was it the chamber pot? He shrugs, ever helpful. Next, the cook claims no knowledge of helmets but offers you a heel of bread. Never hunt on an empty stomach, you reason, stuffing it in your pocket like a true adventurer. Down the stairs you gallop, nearly colliding with a tray-laden squire. Sir Gareth's helmet? The boy squeaks. I saw it being used as a soup bowl in the kitchens, my lord. Knightly colander, they called it. You grimace at the image of turnip stew dripping from the visor, definitely something the makers did not intend. After a detour through the armory, where you briefly consider whether equipping yourself with 3 extra helmets might speed things up, you spot fresh commotion in the courtyard. There, a group of younger squires, faces smeared with mud and triumph, are enacting their own medieval football match, the ball being nothing other than Sir Gareth's missing helmet. It's battered, probably insulted, but miraculously, still in one piece. Time for a heroic intervention. You dash into the melee, avoiding a flying boot, and demand the return of the helmet in your best impression of an outraged herald. The squires protest, but the glint of determination in your eyes, not to mention the threat of kitchen duty, is convincing. Reluctantly, they surrender the prize, still warm from its adventures. Helmet in hand, you pause for a moment, brushing off grass stains and what could either be stew residue or medieval sunscreen. This battered relic has stories of its own, imaginary battles fought in the mud, forbidden soups ladled from its brim, and now, questing squires who will recount this day for years. But your journey is not over. With the tournament clock ticking, you sprint for the knight's quarters. Where were you? Sir Gareth booms as you appear, helmet in hand. You're tempted to recount the entire saga, right down to the helmet's brief career as athletic equipment, but opt for a humble, recovered, sir. The knight inspects it, raises an eyebrow at the aromatic bouquet wafting from within, and nods. Good work, a true squire's perseverance. Relief washes over you. The helmet is back in its rightful place, and disaster is narrowly averted. If legends are to be believed, you've just enacted the greatest rescue mission since the time someone recovered the laundry from the moat. The day's lesson? Squires may be unsung, but their heroics keep the chivalric gears turning. So, next time you spot a trail of breadcrumbs, boot prints, and kitchenware where it doesn't belong, you'll know. An epic quest is never far away, and neither, it seems, is a missing helmet. Squire life means helping in the kitchens, where onions and leeks outnumber hopes and dreams. You peel, you chop, and you try not to cry, but not for the reasons you think. It begins in the late afternoon, when the kitchen's heat is already climbing, thick with the smells of root vegetables, yesterday's bread, and unwashed aprons. There's always a sense of quiet before the storm, a collective inhale among the kitchen staff, a moment of hope that maybe the supplies will run short and no one will ask for stew. This hope is always dashed. Game or no game, a noble's table expects abundance. And so, with sleeves rolled up and knives at the ready, the squire joins the fray. The master cook, a woman with arms like tree trunks and a voice that brooks no nonsense, slaps a bulging sack of onions onto the table. You are handed a small knife, never the large one, never the sharp one reserved for actual cooks. This knife was likely last sharpened during the last rain. You grit your teeth and get to work, the papery skins fighting you every step of the way, slipping from your fingers as you desperately try not to look incompetent. The kitchen has its own hierarchy after all, and nothing marks you out as painfully new, like fumbling an onion. With the first cut, the onion scent blooms, pollen for the eyes, and you try every trick you've heard, from holding your breath to biting your tongue. None work. The sharpness creeps in, stinging the corners of your eyes, and soon enough, you are blinking back tears that have nothing to do with homesickness, homespun cot blankets, or the look your knight gave you after yesterday's blunder. It is strange, the humility enforced by an onion. The rhythm sets in, slice, scrape, gather. Peel after peel stacks up, and with each layer, the air thickens with the communal misery of every squire, cook, and kitchen maid who's ever had to beg the onions for mercy. Sometimes another squire will sidle up beside you, sharing a look that is half camaraderie and half exhaustion. And maybe you'll trade whispered complaints about kitchen duty. Maybe you'll even laugh, voices pitched low so the cook doesn't catch you. Misery does, in fact, love company. All around, the kitchen is a blur of motion. Hands stirring cauldrons, feet sidestepping puddles of spilled broth. The constant clatter of wooden spoons against iron pots. Over it all, the master cook barks reminders and rebukes. Finely, not chunks, unless you want to chew your dinner like a cow. And you force your bleary eyes into focus, trying to approximate finely with a blade that seems to crush more than it cuts. In these moments, dinner prep becomes a test of endurance, a trial worthy of any battlefield. And as the onions dwindle and the pile of peels grows, you realize something. This is the forge where squires are tempered, not in the lists or the sparring yard, but elbow deep in, vegetables fumbling with dull knives, proving, if only to yourself, that there is something noble in every ignoble task. By the time the kitchen bell rings and you are released to scrub your hands, onions lingering stubbornly in every crease of your skin, you are battered but oddly triumphant. There is a fellowship in shared hardship, a badge of humility and grit that you share with every kitchen-worn squire before you. And if your eyes are still suspiciously watery as you return to your chores, well, let them think what they will. This too is part of the making of a knight. As the sun sets, it's your job to run through cold, echoing halls, lighting every candle. Each wick is a reminder that the dark ages were really dark. There is a reason why candle duty is often dreaded, and, at the same time, revered. It's not just about light, it's about keeping the shadows of despair at bay. Imagine, with each pass of your fumbling hand, the flint scrapes, the wick catches, and a small miracle is born. The orange halo blooms, presses back the gloom, marking a little victory in a relentless war against encroaching night. In these moments, the house creaks as if in gratitude, the walls breathe easier, and you sense for a second that your own pulse is brighter for the effort. Candle duty demands more than physical presence. It pulls at something deeper. Sure, you could leave the house in darkness, let the shadows expand, their icy reach slipping over the floors and up the staircases, but you don't. The urge to strike another match is the stubborn ember of hope itself, a spark that sometimes surprises you with its will to survive. This is where the ritual, as ordinary as it seems, turns defiant, a protest against sadness, fatigue, and the seductive call to let it all slip. Candle after candle, you remind yourself, tomorrow will come. You learn quickly that relighting the will to live rarely arrives in glorious cinematic waves. It's not forged by dramatic speeches or life-altering epiphanies. It's the work of relentless, repetitive acts, the steady hands, the sore knees, and the scorched knuckles that come from reaching too far down a blackened corridor for that last stubborn candle. In those minutes, your mind wanders, replaying every doubt, every stored-up regret. Sometimes you catch yourself drifting, standing for too long in the dark between two small islands of candlelight. It is tempting to linger there, to surrender to the void, but you don't. You push further because someone, maybe just you, depends on the next small circle of light. The ritual of candle duty is also connective. It binds you to all the lonely caretakers whose nights have stretched endlessly before you. You think perhaps of monks in frigid monasteries, mothers in cramped kitchens, survivors in ruined cities, each one moving from wick to wick, their own faces golden and determined. It is exhausting, sometimes thankless labor, but as the glow accumulates, it builds something unseen. A flickering tapestry of persistence. Light gathers in corners, pools under the mantles, clings to ceiling beams. If you slow down to look over your shoulder, you realize you all are doing something together, after all, scattered as you may be. All the while, the struggle of candle duty is quietly honest. You are forced to encounter your own reluctance, your tendency to skip corners, to wish away the task. The cold makes your hands ache, and there are nights when the final candle feels impossibly far. Yet still, that last stub of wax and wick means something. To light it is to affirm, again and again, that you choose presence over absence, agency over resignation. You cannot banish the dark forever, but you refuse to leave it unchecked. In the end, the beauty of candle duty isn't the staggering sweep of your luminance. It lies instead in your fragile, determined commitment to relight. Candle by candle, you bear witness to your own resilience. Not because you're unbreakable, but because every night gives you a chance to begin again. Every wick promises that, no matter how low the wax runs or how chill the air grows, there is willpower left to conjure another flame. The days may be heavy, your spirit frayed. Still, when the sun sets and the halls grow cold, you hold the duty close and let another little light in. Evening means returning to the stables, politely scraping, shoveling, and avoiding eye contact with that one horse who definitely hates you. Somewhere between the first wheelbarrow and the third, you stop pretending that rubber boots are much protection. Your socks give up, surrendering to an invasion of something you hope is just water. Each step becomes a soft, squelching reminder that, among all the animals here, humans are probably the least dignified at this hour. The horses know this. They watch, eyelids half closed, satisfied with their elevated status, while you, mere mortals with pitchforks, attempt to restore order to a kingdom of hay and manure. It's in this moment, with the barn dust swirling, that time slows down enough for self-reflection, or self-pity, depending on the day. Humility doesn't arrive as epiphany. It drifts in on the breeze, somewhere between the scent of sweet feed and the sharper notes of reality. No matter how efficient you try to look, or how thoroughly you scrape and sweep, there will always be a corner that evades you, an unyielding patch of muck that laughs at your best intentions. Of course, your efforts do not go unnoticed. The horses, each with their own brand of judgment, nod approvingly or snort in theatrical disgust. The old gelding at the end, with the chewed-up halter, is especially expressive. You could swear he rolls his eyes when you drop the shovel for the third time. The chestnut mare, meanwhile, silently communicates that she expects better from someone with opposable thumbs. It's a fellowship of equals, minus the opposable. Thumbs, the boot full of mystery liquid, and the existential questions that seem to filter in with the dust. Who am I? Why am I here, scraping, bagging, avoiding confrontation with one exceptionally vindictive-looking Shetland? What is the purpose of all this manual labor if, by morning, it is as if you had never been here at all? The stalls are a Sisyphean canvas, and you, the humble artist, work entirely in browns and golds. As the workload continues, it's tempting to wallow in self-pity, but the truth is, there's an odd satisfaction to it, something almost meditative. Each repetitive motion offers a rhythm, a little practice at acceptance. You learn humility not because you seek it, but because the alternative is hubris, and hubris doesn't mop up spills or coax a grumpy horse back into his freshly cleaned bed. Eventually, those smells, sharp and earthy at first, stop feeling like an attack. They become the scent of a job, the smell of a space cared for, if not conquered, and underneath it all, layered in with the sweat and mud and quiet indignities, is a sense that you're part of something larger, something cyclical, unapologetically messy, and completely necessary. The horses don't say thank you, but they settle into their beds, and that's maybe thanks enough. Cleanup is the evening's punctuation, not glamorous, rarely praised, always necessary. It teaches you that nobility is found in perseverance, in routine, and in finding comedy where others see only drudgery. If you're lucky, as you close the stall doors and breathe in the last, lingering smell of humility, you'll realize that some of the dust you carry home was earned honestly, with every honest shovelful. Every lord needs errands run. That means crossing moat, field, and endless stairs to deliver messages nobody reads, while pretending your feet are not, in fact, wet again. Being a messenger in a medieval stronghold was a curious blend of prestige and low-level humiliation. On one hand, a scroll in your hand meant you were trusted, or at least available. On the other, it often signified that your time was considered less important than the recipient's. There you are, standing by the hall, yearning for a mug of small beer, when a steward presses a tightly rolled letter and a stern, urgent, into your hand. No time for a sip, only the long route down the east stairs, past the kitchen, though you're strictly forbidden to sample the meat pies, and out into the drizzle. The castle itself is a living obstacle course. The stone corridors, always a little too dark and far too narrow, are clogged with servants carrying bread, soldiers' boots, or, on unlucky days, slopping buckets best not examined too closely. Add in the sporadic attack of the resident mastiff, who, for reasons unknown, considers messengers a natural enemy. Each journey becomes a test of agility. Ducking tapestries, vaulting puddles, and periodically apologizing to a noblewoman alarmed by your muddy feet, which you definitely had cleaned at sunrise. Once outside, the real challenge begins. Rainwater gathers in ankle-deep pools at the bottom of the bridge, right where the drawbridge planks never quite meet. No matter how expertly you sidestep, the trickle finds its way through those woolen hose. It is, in fact, an immutable law of castle physics. No messenger ever returns with dry socks. The route between castle buildings is similarly beset with hazards, natural and human-made. Chickens sensing fresh prey form impromptu barricades that only the bravest messengers penetrate unscathed. A wrong turn, and you're stopped by the stable hands, demanding answers about last week's missing bridle. "Ask the carpenters," you shout as you scurry past. Don't even think about racing across the tilting planks to the kitchen garden, unless you have a firm grip and eyes in the back of your head. For the cook guards her herbs like a dragon guards gold. If you're lucky, your delivery is met with mild indifference, a nod, perhaps a mumbled, "leave it on the table," and you can reverse your route with only mild trepidation about what waits back at the hall. But messengers know all too well that most messages simply accumulate on their recipients' desks until the ink blurs and wax seals wilt. Vital missive for Lord Geoffrey sits side by side with tonight's turnip inventory. Neither will be opened in a hurry. The sole compensation for these soggy perseverances, as veteran runners call them, is the slim chance of eavesdropping on intrigue. Occasionally you catch snippets of whispered plotting or a glance at an unusually ornate seal, enough material for a whole evening's worth of humble boasting in the servants' quarters by firelight. A clever messenger learns quickly. Discretion is good, but so is selectively juicy gossip. For every delivery finally made, and every unexpected detour involving ducks, one learns to savor the small victories. Making it from keep to gatehouse without losing one's shoe. Evading the launderer who will absolutely berate you for the new mud stains she just finished scrubbing from the last errand. The rhythm of hoofbeats, drum of rain, echo of boots on ancient stone steps, these become the pulse of castle life, and the soundtrack to your medieval marathon. And so, with wet feet and wind-reddened nose, you return to the hall, scroll delivered, mission accomplished, until, of course, the steward appears again. There's another urgent errand, this time to the far dairy. Good luck, and don't scare the cows. Festivals require squires to haul banners, shine trumpets, and stand perfectly still for 3 hours, so the neighboring lord can nod appreciatively for half a second. There is no task quite so humbling, or so thoroughly uncelebrated, as the carrying of a flag at a grand procession. To be assigned a banner is to be singled out as both entirely trustworthy and, crucially, eminently forgettable. The ideal flag bearer blends into the background, becomes a moving part of the scenery, less a participant, more a mobile plinth for embroidered heraldry. The pageantry demands that you appear proud, resolute, and absolutely invisible all at once. Preparation begins the night before, with the careful extraction of banners from where they have been stored since the last event, the location of which is a carefully guarded secret, known only to the castle's second oldest squire, and the mouse who chewed a hole in the fabric 2 Junes ago. Each banner is then unfurled and examined under candlelight for moth holes, ale stains, or suspicious scorch marks. These discoveries are met not with alarm, but with a resigned shrug. What is tradition, after all, if not a heroic effort to hide last year's mistakes behind this year's embroidery? No one will notice, provided you keep the wind behind you. Once deemed passable, the banners receive a vigorous beating, not out of any ritual significance, but because it's the only surefire way to dislodge the armies of dust, cobwebs, and, on one memorable occasion, a still-dozing bat which have taken up residence in the intervening months. This task falls to the lowest-ranking squires, whose enthusiasm quickly wears thin as the banners multiply. The grand total, once every minor cousin and dubious ancestral claim has been counted, is always at least 3 more than anyone remembers. Next come drills. Squires are instructed to march up and down the muddy bailey in single file, banner poles balanced precariously on their shoulders. The marshal barks commands about posture: stand tall, elbows in, eyes forward, until standing tall feels unnatural and forward seems impossible to locate. If the wind picks up, the whole column is treated to a sudden, unscheduled enactment of historical defeat, wherein half the flags careen eastward, dragging their bemused bearers with them. This, the marshal assures them, is character building. Practicalities dominate the morning of the festival. Tunics are pulled over hastily donned undershirts, boots are laced, helmets are polished enough to show a vague, blurry face. This is crucial, as it distracts from the expression of abject boredom that will soon settle in. The most junior squire is dispatched to fetch the ceremonial banner-weighting stones, an invention of dire necessity, given that 2 years ago the Earl's standard was last seen airborne, careening into Mrs. Weatherby's goose pen. And then, at last, the procession. Squires arrange themselves along the parade route, clutching their assigned banners with an iron grip, faces settling into the noble grimace trained into them over generations. The assembled villagers cheer, at least until distracted by the pie stall or the prospect of seeing the mayor attempt a cartwheel. The visiting lords glance over, perhaps offering that coveted fleeting nod, a gesture rich with the promise of future favor, or at least future duties. For the duration, the flag-bearer's job is simple. Don't trip. Don't let the banner twist. Don't let it touch the ground. And above all, don't distract from whatever grand spectacle is happening 10 paces ahead. It is a perfect lesson in humility, a reminder that, at festivals and in life, some honors are bestowed for no other reason than the need for someone, anyone, to carry the flag nobody notices. This maintains your established humor, vivid detail, and dry tone, while developing the segment fully. If you'd like adjustments or a different angle, just let me know. After a long day, your knight always finds something, muddy boots, missing gloves, dented pride, to grumble about. You nod, apologize, and remember your place. The medieval customer service desk. It's a ritual as old as the Round Table itself. The sound of plate armor clanking down the hallway is your warning sign, a reminder that even if dragons were slain and damsels rescued, nobody slays disappointment in this tent quite like Sir Reginald. He enters in a swirl of chainmail and indignation, brandishing not his sword, but the steely list of grievances he's accumulated over the day. The silence that precedes his first complaint is almost reverent, a pre-battle hush before the storm. 3 separate times today, he begins, voice echoing off the stone walls. I requested my lance be polished before the joust. What do I find upon inspection? Fingerprints, smudges, like the hands of some medieval street urchin have pawed my noble weapon. You offer up your best apologetic smile, the kind that's been perfected over many such encounters. My apologies, Sir Reginald. The squire responsible has been lectured extensively and will, no doubt, spend the evening scrubbing the stables as penance. He continues, undeterred. And my boots, caked in mud from the tilt yard. How is a knight to maintain his honor when his boots look as though he's been mucking pigs instead of dueling gallant foes? You nod solemnly. You both know you'll be the one cleaning them later, cursing the day you thought squiring was your ticket to glory. These critiques are rarely about what they seem. On the surface, it's about polish and pride, but underneath lies the battered heart of a true knight. The stress, the exhaustion, the constant pressure to be both terrifying on the battlefield and dazzling at court. Today, Sir Reginald was unhorsed by his rival, Sir Cedric, in front of the princess and her giggling maids. You suspect that more than just his boots are splattered with mud. The trick is reading between the lines. The louder he bellows about a dented shield, the more deeply wounded his ego is. This is the part of the job that's never covered in the Squire's manual. You're a confidant, a scapegoat, and sometimes a very discreet therapist. So you listen, nodding at intervals, offering the right mix of deference and fake optimism. Yes, Sir Reginald, I'll polish the lance until it gleams. Of course, I'll ensure your armor is dazzling enough to blind your foes. Absolutely, your gloves will never go missing again. He sighs, his tirade spent, and finally flops onto a bench. For a brief moment, his guard drops. Remember, lad, he mutters, softer now, a knight is only as good as his squire. You look down, partly out of respect, partly to hide your grin. The relationship is more than lectures and chores. It's the unspoken alliance that keeps the whole precarious pageantry from falling apart. Later, as you start scrubbing the mud from his boots beneath the flickering light of a torch, you replay the exchange. Being the medieval customer service desk means taking the brunt of every gripe and groan, shouldering the blame for a world that rarely lives up to heroic expectations. It's a rhythm you know well. Their yelling, your reassuring gestures, and the quiet understanding that tomorrow it'll all play out again. And despite the noise and mess, you wouldn't trade it. After all, behind every grumpy knight is a squire holding everything, armor, lances, and silent loyalty, together. You're not alone. Dozens of equally exhausted squires compete, gossip, and invent new insults for garlic breath. Every day is an episode of Survivor Castle Edition. From the moment you shuffle out of your straw-stuffed mattress at dawn, the castle's corridors echo with the not-so-gentle thudding of boots and the whisper of calculated alliances. Sure, you all dream of shiny armor and glorious knighthood, but right now, it's about who gets to polish Lord Hugh's helmet and who has to scrub the garderobe. Is it every squire for himself? Sometimes. But it's also a bizarre brotherhood, a strange muddy mix of loyalty and rivalry that makes even the dirtiest trench battle look clean. Let's talk competition. Forget fair jousts in shining arenas. Your battleground is the stable yard, the kitchens, and even the laundry room. Want an extra dinner roll? Better be quick, or Thomas, the guy with the insincerely sweet smile, will snatch it right off your plate as soon as you blink. And that's the least of it. There's a black market of chores, traded like medieval baseball cards. I'll muck your stall if you cover my dawn watch. Just pray you don't get saddled with the horse that's been hitting the leaks a little too hard. Of course, medieval slander is both an art and a local sport. Garlic breath is just the beginning. If you mess up, say you forget to oil the chainmail or spill soup on a knight's tabard, your new nickname will be less than glorious and absolutely permanent. There's always that one squire who turns every misstep into an epic saga, retelling your mistakes with a flair for exaggeration that would make a bard blush. Every mishap gets reshaped in the communal imagination until you start to wonder if you really did ride the sheep through the Great Hall. You didn't, it was Geoffrey, but try telling them that. Not all is playful banter. Some squires are genuinely out to get ahead, and not all are content to get there honestly. Watch out for the sap who helpfully restrings your practice bow, upside down, or the guy who slips an extra stone into your training satchel before sprints. Betrayals range from the petty, hiding your one good spoon, to the epic, sabotaging your interview with the arms master, then giving you a congratulatory pat on the back. Still, there are moments of unexpected camaraderie. Maybe it's the midnight shift shivering together in the cold, swapping ridiculous tales about your masters, sharing bread and hard cheese, or covering for each other when one of you oversleeps. Sometimes these frenemies turn into real friends, comrades in arms who will one day stand shield to shield beside you in an actual battle. Because while you're all fighting for the favor of your lords, you're also getting pretty good at defending each other from the scullery maid's wrath when you accidentally spill the gravy. The key to surviving this medieval Game of Thrones? Pick your battles as carefully as you pick the least smelly tunic. Sometimes it's worth letting an insult slide. There's always a chance to get even at the next archery contest. Sometimes you need to stand your ground, lest you become the castle's permanent butt of the joke. Find your small circle, trust, but verify. Remember, nobody rises through the ranks entirely alone, but not everyone celebrating your victories is a friend. At the end of the day, dealing with other squires is its own kind of knightly training, a crash course in wit, resilience, and the ability to find your boots wherever they've been hidden. After all, if you can survive medieval frenemy drama, you'll handle bandits and dragons in your sleep. Maybe that's the real trial before knighthood, proving you can outsmart, outlast, and, occasionally, outprank the people closest to you. Welcome to the court. Let the games begin. Squires don't get breaks, but you're clever. Behind a bale of hay or under a table, you learn the lost art of dozing while vertical. There are unspoken rules to napping in the bustling, chaotic environment of the castle. First, don't get caught. Second, don't snore. Third, and this one's critical, don't drool on the Lord's war horse. The ability to fall asleep at impossible angles, amidst the clang of armor and the groans of kitchen maids, becomes your badge of honor. You would conquer sleep deprivation, if only for a quarter hour. Nap time for a squire is less about comfort and more about strategy. You're forever on the lookout for those sacred slivers of shadow, between a blacksmith's anvil and the wall, under a worn tapestry, or, for the daring, behind the ale barrels in the pantry. Finding the spot is half the battle. The real test is holding absolutely still while emitting the kind of unbothered, innocent expression usually seen on choir boys and saints. On especially busy afternoons, you perfect the noble art of sleeping with eyes half open. Jostled awake by a stray goat or a passing knight, you spring to alertness mid-snore, mumbling something about polishing the saddles. Experience has taught you the key phrases every napper should have ready. Just checking for leaks in the roof. I was praying, sir, or the ever-reliable, I must have fainted from the overwhelming smell of turnips. Of course, half of squiring is being available at a moment's notice. Abandon hope of naps on melee days or during royal visits. Sleeping now resembles a high-risk espionage mission. Your best friend is the one who agrees to cover for you, with all the solemn gravity of a sworn oath, taking up lookout duty at the first shout of Squire. When that bellow inevitably comes, you jolt upright with the agility of a startled ferret, ready to pretend you've been upright all along. Nonetheless, castle napping is an education in humility. There is always the moment when your clever hiding spot turns out to have been already claimed. You'll stare into the wary, sleep-deprived eyes of another squire, sharing a tacit agreement not to blow the other's cover. Except for Thomas. Thomas always snores. Your nap attempts are interrupted as often as they're completed. Surviving on bursts of 10-minute slumbers, you begin to see other nappers as comrades in arms, part of a shadowy league battling yawns and droopy eyelids. Sometimes you find yourself fantasizing about a real bed, one without chainmail poking your ribs or straw in your hair. Inevitably, you find inventive new techniques. Perhaps the standing saddle slump, a method involving leaning perilously against your master's horse, until the beast shifts and you scramble not to fall, or the classic armor pillow, which entails bunching up a spare gambeson and using it as the world's least comfortable mattress. Every morning, you wake with a few more bruises and a bit less dignity, but, miracle of miracles, a smidge more energy. Days blur into nights and back again, and the legends say real knights survived on bravery and honor. You know the truth. Real knights survived because they once were squires who mastered sleeping with one eye open and could nap, even standing up whenever fortune permitted. You may wake in a panic, dust down your tunic, and ready the swords for training, but you'll always look for that next little window of shut-eye, that next secret spot where you can catch your breath and snatch a sliver of sleep. Because if a squire's life is a whirlwind, a nap, even a botched one, is the eye of the storm. Medieval medicine is advanced if you like leeches and guesses. You tourniquet, bandage, and consult Agnes, the medieval WebMD, whose answer is, always try more cabbage. If you're unlucky enough to lose a limb or run afoul of a mysterious pustule, your options are as follows: pray, panic, or apply paste. And what is in this paste? That's a trade secret, handed down from one wide-eyed herbalist to the next. If you ask old Agnes, she'll rattle off ingredients with the same confidence as a modern superfood blogger: mugwort, nettles, marigold petals, maybe a suspicious chunk of garlic, and of course, always a dollop of honey for drawing out the bad humors. Stir well and apply liberally. Repeat twice daily, or until you regain full use of your limb or your limb falls off, whichever comes first. The practice of medicine, medieval edition, is a balancing act between optimism and improvisation. Doctors are either monks with a stash of moldy bread or itinerant chirurgeons who boast about how many arms they've successfully removed. Bloodletting is the cure to everything from headaches to heartbreak. Feeling faint? Time to drain some blood. Broken toe? Let's open a vein. Lost hope? Bloodletting. After all, if you're slightly woozy, you'll be far too tired to complain. Of course, poultices are the true stars of medieval injury management, the herbal gouges and sticky pastes you never asked for, but Agnes insists are miracle cures. These greenish-brown mysteries are brewed up with a sense of drama. Take a pinch of dragon's blood, tree sap, not actual dragon, crush in a few purifying herbs, and slather the concoction onto wounds until you look like you fell asleep in a compost heap. There's often a ritualistic chant, mostly for effect. May the spirits of chamomile and goose fat grant you swift recovery. Is it scientific? No. Is it comforting? Questionable. But it does at least make you feel as though something is being done. When all else fails, resort to leeches. Leeches are the wonder tool in every medieval first aid kit. Twisted ankle, leeches. Bad back, leeches. Toothache, you guessed it, leeches. The logic is simple. If your body is losing fluids, maybe it will lose the problem too. Of course, nothing quite says, "I trust the science," like allowing a slimy worm to feast on your misfortune, while Agnes hums a lullaby in the background. Yet, to give credit where due, sometimes an infection resolves, most likely due to sheer luck or your immune system's stubborn refusal to quit. Pain control is rudimentary. Alcohol doubles as disinfectant and anesthetic. Take a large gulp and pretend you're somewhere else, as medieval advice goes. If things are dire, a chunk of willow bark is chewed for its salicylic acid, aspirin's great-grandparent. Soon after, your pain melts into a fog, or you just fall asleep for lack of better options. But beyond the gore and cabbage suggestions, medieval injury care is rooted in community. You won't suffer alone. Word spreads fast. And before long, every neighbor has advice. Fill your shoes with rosemary, or rub rabbit fat on your temples. It takes a village to heal a wound, or at least to generate enough entertainment to distract you while your body does the heavy lifting. In summary, medieval injury management is an adventure in optimism, bravado, and extreme herbalism. Will it work? Maybe. Will it be memorable? Absolutely. With cabbage, leeches, and a side helping of good intentions, you just might live to tell the tale. Or, at the very least, inspire next week's remedy from Agnes. Have you tried twice as much cabbage? At last, you drag yourself back to your gloomy corner. Is the bed softer tonight? No, but you're too tired to care. You lie down, listen to the groans of fellow squires, and bargain with the lice gods for mercy. The straw mattress squishes underneath you, releasing an unidentifiable smell that mingles with the earthy scent of muddy boots and stale sweat. Your body aches in places you didn't know existed, a chorus of bruises and blisters earned from a day spent running at the beck and call of knights, stable hands, and cooks. There's a strange comfort in the exhaustion. The world narrows down to the simple fact of surviving each day, and tonight, survival means ignoring the itching and the prickling and hoping for just a few moments of dreamless sleep. Around you, the boys in the squire's quarters exchange subdued grumbles and half-hearted jokes. Someone coughs in the darkness. Another curses softly as they scratch at their scalp. You recognize the familiar voices, the patterns of complaint, a nightly ritual that, in its own worn way, binds all of you together. You think of home, the softness of your mother's touch, the warmth of a real bed. But those memories are distant, as faded as the daylight that's disappeared outside the stable walls. Your corner is your own, sort of. A thin blanket you manage to liberate from the laundry sits bunched at your feet. In its folds are stories. The time you traded a slice of hard cheese for a patch, the desperate cold of last winter, the night you and Thomas huddled for warmth and whispered about escaping. But every morning, you're still here, and so is the straw, and so are the lice. You roll to your side and watch the flickering torchlight cast strange shapes along the wall. Shadows of the day's chaos dance there. The swing of a sword, the heft of a bucket, the fluttering of a frantic chicken that someone failed to catch. You think about the endless errands, the mud caked on your boots, the sharp words from the master at arms. The weight of your wooden training sword presses against your hip, even as you lie down. It's as if the responsibilities of the day cling to your very skin. Despite exhaustion, sleep won't come easily. Hunger gnaws at your belly. Dinner was a thin stew and a scrap of bread, quickly swallowed before you were called to yet another chore. Someone's snoring breaks the silence, then a startled yelp as a rat scurries across the floor. You pull your knees to your chest and try to block out the world. In the darkness, your thoughts drift. Maybe tomorrow will be different. Maybe you won't drop the shield during drills, or the knight whose boots you polished will toss you a copper as thanks. Perhaps you'll impress the kitchen maid with an extra apple pilfered from the barrel. Small hopes, but sometimes they are enough. You wonder how the knights sleep upstairs. Are their beds really softer? Do they dream of glory, or are they also kept up by the aches of their armor and the worries of battle? You promise yourself that one day you'll find out. For now, you settle for shifting over, seeking a patch of straw that isn't already flattened and poking through your tunic. As you feel your eyes grow heavy, the sounds of the squire's quarters fade into the background. Tomorrow, you'll rise before dawn. Scrub armor until your hands are raw. Run until your legs burn. And try not to get caught dozing off during training. But, for now, you close your eyes and surrender to the fitful sleep of a boy who dreams, against all odds, of one day being more than just another body among the straw. The lice have mercy, or perhaps you are simply too tired to care. Every squire has one. Dreams of knighthood, glory, and maybe an actual mattress. You imagine tournaments, applause, and a morning without beetles. Then the rooster crows again. But let's linger in that moment between rooster crows, a place where reality softly dissolves and imagination takes the reins. In the flickering candlelight of the drafty squire's quarters, our intrepid hero lies awake, staring at the rafters, cataloging every ache from their day of learning, polishing armor until their fingers feel like parsnips. Their mind drifts far from the hay-filled corners of the manor. Maybe tomorrow, they tell themselves, they'll do something so outrageously daring and competent, single-handedly catching that runaway destrier, or reciting the code of chivalry backwards while balancing a bread loaf on their head, that Sir Roderick will finally notice. Maybe he'll say, "Today, you ride," or at least, "You did well. Take the afternoon off before you get more hay in the treacle." The escape fantasy blossoms. In this rare dreamland, squires are not the ones fetching water at dawn or getting blamed for mysterious stains on the lord's doublet. Here, they're galloping down the lists, sunlight glinting off polished armor, not by their own hand, thank you very much, but by the skill of imaginary apprentices. The crowds cheer, banners wave, a fair maiden, who surely exists somewhere, with notably uncalloused hands, tosses a fragrant garland. Perhaps, in these moonlit imaginings, the mattress isn't just a wool sack on planks, but clouds. No one snores but the trumpets of victory. Of course, actual escape is unlikely. Crossing the manor, threshold without leave invites questions and, worse, more chores. The closest a squire usually gets to a day off is when the lord's hunting party gets lost and no one remembers to summon dinner. Still, the dream persists. It's a quiet comfort against clattering hooves, sudden inspections, and nightly encounters with livestock that treat the squire's sleeping spot as both buff and bathroom. These reveries are a lifeline. They sneak between chores, tugging the corners of the mouth into secret smirks. They fuel competition. Who can tell the boldest tale of their future knighthood over stale brown bread? They bond squires together through shared discontent and hope, a hushed camaraderie built from collectively endured humility. There's always that squire who, after a particularly gruesome latrine duty, vows to return as a knight and build the grandest privy the castle has ever known, fully walled, roofed, and possibly with a moat to keep nosy pigs at bay. What might surprise us is how little these escape fantasies differed through the ages. Squires then, and exhausted interns or over-caffeinated students today, share something essential: hope spun from irritation, an ambition kindled by discomfort, and imaginative plotting held together by a battered sense of humor. Maybe that's why these old stories endure. Whether it's straw or spreadsheets, we understand the urge to imagine our own shining moment, when all the tireless labor metamorphoses into something admired and applauded, into freedom, or at least a softer bed. Yet what makes these fantasies precious isn't their likelihood, but their power. They keep shoulders squared beneath armor that doesn't quite fit yet, and eyes bright even as dawn stretches out another long list of opportunities to grow. Through every awkward bow, every polish it again, and every misstep, the dream remains. The idea that things change, that effort is noticed, that one day we'll move beyond merely surviving to truly thriving. So, the next time you're lying in bed, legs tangled in cool sheets, let a little escape fantasy in. It might not make the rooster crow any later, but it might make the morning lighter, and the road ahead just a bit more golden. So, tonight, as you drift off in your actual bed, clean sheets, real pillows, probably no goats. Remember the squires who paved the slow, hay-strewn road to modern comfort. They scraped, buffed, and survived hilarity, humiliation, and history's harshest internships. Next time you sigh over an annoying work email or a chore you'd rather avoid, think of our medieval friends, up before dawn, asleep on straw, and always one chamber pot away from a very public failure. Because while history was often gritty, itchy, and strange, it was also full of people who persisted, adapted, and maybe even laughed at the absurdity of it all. So, let yourself relax, be grateful for running water, and send a quiet thanks to the squires. They made it through, so you can too. Good night.